5:47 a.m., April 12, 1961. On the vast Kazakh steppe, the temperature is a biting -8 degrees Celsius, even as the spring dawn breaks. A modified R-7 rocket sits on Pad 1, venting plumes of liquid oxygen into air so dry it hasn't rained in 6 weeks. Inside the tiny Vostok capsule, a 27-year-old pilot named Yuri Gagarin waits for the signal that will change history. The launch complex around him is a secret empire stretching over 2,500 square miles of desert, an area larger than the entire state of Delaware. It's a ghost city of 44 launch pads, 1,500 buildings, and 15,000 workers, a place that doesn't officially exist on any map. The Soviets called it Baikonur, a clever deception since the real town of Baikonur was 200 miles away. The Americans, tracking it with spy planes, called it Tyuratam, after the nearest railway stop. But the people who built it, the soldiers and prisoners who laid the concrete and steel, they just called it the edge of the world. At 9:07 a.m. Moscow time, Gagarin's voice crackles over the radio with 2 simple words, Poyakali, let's go. 108 minutes later, he becomes the first human to orbit the Earth. The Soviet Union had just won the space race before most Americans even knew there was one. But this victory, celebrated in propaganda posters and headlines around the globe, came at a cost that was never mentioned. Between 1955 and 1961, an estimated 1,200 workers died building this cosmodrome. The Netherlands disaster alone killed 126 people in a single, catastrophic explosion. The city they constructed to support these launches, first called Lenensk, peaked with 70,000 residents. Today, only 39,000 remain, mostly Kazakh citizens guarding aging Russian equipment. Some launch pads are still active, sending new missions into the cosmos. The rest stand silent, colossal monuments to an ambition that burned as bright and as brief as rocket exhaust. So was this progress, or was this sacrifice dressed up in heroic language? I love digging into the real stories behind humanity's greatest achievements and the massive, often abandoned, infrastructure they left behind. Now let's get into the incredible, brutal story of how Baikonur was built. The first sound you notice here isn't the roar of a rocket, it's the wind. A constant, unrelenting wind sweeping across a landscape where nothing grows taller than your knee. In the summer, it's a furnace at 45 degrees Celsius. In the winter, it's a freezer at -40. The land is so flat you can almost see the curvature of the Earth. The Soviets chose this specific patch of nothing precisely because it was worthless for anything else. In 1955, Sergei Korolev, the brilliant and secretive chief designer of the Soviet space program, walked this ground. He had a direct mandate from Khrushchev: build a launch facility capable of sending an intercontinental ballistic missile to America, and make it invisible, permanent, and operational within 2 years. The logic for choosing this site was brutally practical. It had to be far from any borders where American spy planes could easily photograph it. It needed to be close to a railway to transport massive rocket components. It had to be empty enough that when rockets inevitably exploded, the casualties would be considered acceptable back in Moscow. And it needed to be far enough south that the Earth's rotation would give a little extra push to rockets launching eastward. Tyuratam, a railway junction that served absolutely no one, met every single criterion. There was nothing there. No town, no infrastructure, just desert, sky, and 320 days of clear weather per year, perfect for launches. The first workers arrived in January 1955. They were mostly soldiers, conscripts from the strategic rocket forces who were simply told they were building a testing facility. They lived in tents as temperatures dropped to -35. 12 men froze to death in the very first month. The official reports listed them as construction accidents. In the Soviet Union, there were no accidents, only difficulties that were overcome through socialist discipline. By that summer, 10,000 workers were on site. These weren't volunteers. They were conscripts, Gulag prisoners offered early release for 2 years of hard labor, and specialists, engineers, metallurgists, concrete workers who were simply ordered to relocate. You received your orders and you went. Your family might follow or they might not. The state promised housing would be built, eventually. The design Korolev approved was unlike anything ever attempted. Not just a single launch pad, but a massive complex capable of testing and launching multiple missiles at the same time. Pad 1, the main facility, required a flame trench 45 meters deep to redirect the violent exhaust of the rockets. Digging it meant removing 40,000 cubic meters of earth and rock, using equipment designed for Moscow construction sites, not for a steppe where dust-clogged engines and extreme temperatures cracked hydraulics. The concrete work alone consumed resources that are hard to comprehend. 180,000 tons of cement were poured just for Pad 1's foundation. Each launch pad needed reinforced concrete that could withstand 3,000-degree temperatures, acoustic vibrations that would shatter normal concrete, and the explosive force of a fully fueled rocket detonating right on the pad. That formula is still classified today. What we know is that it involved imported chromium, experimental polymers, and ratios that were tested by pouring small batches and literally hitting them with flamethrowers until something survived. By 1956, the workforce had grown to 15,000. The living conditions were catastrophic. The official town, Site 10, later named Leninsk, was supposed to have been completed before the workers even arrived. It wasn't. It wouldn't be habitable until 1958. Until then, people lived in uninsulated barracks, bathed in communal facilities that froze solid for 4 months a year and ate the same bland meals of kasha and cabbage soup because supply trains only came twice a week if the tracks weren't blocked by snow. The mortality statistics were top secret, but declassified engineering records reveal a chilling pattern. A 1957 internal memo noted acceptable attrition rates among the laborers, referring to the replacement of workers lost to weather, accidents, and medical unfitness. Acceptable. That word appears 14 times in just 5 pages. The railway itself was another Herculean effort. They built 470 kilometers of new track just inside the facility grounds, more extensive than some entire regional rail networks. This web of steel had to carry specialized flat cars with 30-meter rocket sections, transport tankers of liquid oxygen and highly corrosive nitric acid, and bring in every single thing a city needs to survive, from cement to canned food. But water was the one problem they never truly solved. The steppe has no rivers. The groundwater is salty and 100 meters deep. They drilled wells, built a 150-kilometer pipeline from the nearest river, and installed desalination equipment that constantly broke down. Water rationing was permanent. Each worker got 40 liters per day for everything: drinking, cooking, washing. For comparison, the average person in Moscow used 250 liters. This wasn't just austerity, it was survival architecture. Launch Pad 1 finally became operational in August 1957, 3 months ahead of schedule. According to records declassified in 1997, it cost 742 lives. That number includes deaths from falls and equipment failures, a typhoid outbreak in 1956, and other unspecified causes, a term used when the real cause was politically inconvenient. The first launch from Pad 1 was on May 15, 1957. An R-7 Semyorka ICBM, designed to deliver a nuclear warhead to the United States. It exploded 98 seconds after launch. The second attempt exploded at ignition. The third went off course and was destroyed. Finally, the fourth launch on August 21, 1957, succeeded. The dummy warhead traveled 6,000 kilometers and hit its target. In a single 20-minute flight, the Soviet Union now had an operational ICBM. The strategic balance of the world had just shifted. But Korolev immediately pivoted to something even more ambitious. If the R-7 could throw a warhead to America, it could throw a satellite into orbit. Khrushchev approved not because he cared about science, but because a satellite launch would demonstrate Soviet missile superiority to the world under the peaceful guise of exploration. It was science as propaganda. On October 4, 1957, Sputnik 1 launched from Pad 1. It was a simple, 83-kilogram aluminum sphere with 4 antennae broadcasting a simple beep that could be heard by amateur radio operators all over the world. Every 96 minutes, it passed over American cities and European capitals. A tiny, beeping, undeniable symbol of Soviet achievement. The global reaction was far beyond what the Soviets expected. America panicked. Congress demanded to know how this had happened. The space race had begun, not as a friendly scientific competition, but as a military humiliation that forced a response. If you are, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And leave a comment telling me which abandoned Cold War facility you want me to explore next. Every like and subscription helps me bring these forgotten histories to light. Thanks for watching. In the vast, empty steppe of Kazakhstan lies a place of incredible contrasts, a monument to human ambition and its devastating cost. This is Baikonur, the world's first and largest spaceport. It was from here that the Soviet Union launched humanity into the cosmos. By 1960, this secret complex was a marvel of engineering, boasting 44 launch pads, massive assembly facilities, and a dedicated city, Leninsk, housing over 35,000 people. Leninsk was a classic Soviet-planned city-identical concrete apartment blocks, a central parade square, and schools. It was anywhere Soviet Union, except it was the most secret and crucial place in the entire country. Security was absolute. The city didn't appear on any maps. Letters sent from residents were postmarked from a fictitious location. The entire area was a closed military city, ringed by fences and armed guards with shoot-on-sight orders for any unauthorized approach. The signs were very clear about this. This obsession with control and secrecy came at a horrific human price. On October 24, 1960, the Netherlands disaster occurred. An R-16 missile sat fueled on the pad, plagued by technical problems. Standard procedure demanded draining the fuel and returning it for diagnostics. But Marshal Mitrofan Nedeljin, head of the Strategic Rocket Forces, was impatient. With party officials on their way, a delay would look bad. He ordered his engineers to fix the problem right there on the pad. Over 120 technicians swarmed the fully fueled missile. Nedeljin himself sat in a chair just 50 meters away, smoking a cigarette to project confidence. Then, the second stage engine ignited by accident. The hypergolic propellants in the stages below exploded on contact. A fireball exceeding 3,000 degrees engulfed the launch pad. People, burning alive, ran for the perimeter fence. But it was locked. They died clawed against the wire. The official death toll was 126. Some bodies were completely vaporized, identified only by a wedding ring fused to a bone fragment. Marshal Nedeljin was found in his chair, burned beyond recognition, identified by his melted watch. The Soviet government covered it up, announcing he died in a plane crash. Families were told their loved ones died in various accidents and were sworn to secrecy. Some didn't learn the truth until the 1990s. The disaster didn't slow the program. The space race was too important. Sergei Korolev, the chief designer who had argued with Nedeljin about safety and left the pad just before the explosion, was shattered. But he delivered. Less than 6 months later, on April 12, 1961, Yuri Gagarin launched into history from Baikonur's Pad 1, the same pad that had seen so much failure. Gagarin's 108-minute orbit was an immeasurable propaganda victory. The Soviet Union had put a man in space. America was weeks behind. But the headlines in Pravda omitted the true cost. Officially, 742 workers died just building the facility. Add the 126 from the Netherlands disaster and the unknown number from other accidents and failed launches. An estimated 3,000 workers suffered chronic illness from exposure to toxic rocket fuels like hydrazine. They worked with minimal protective gear, rubber gloves, cloth masks, sometimes not even that. Hydrazine exposure causes liver damage, respiratory failure, and cancer. No health studies were ever done. The workers were never told the risks. Baikonur's golden era was the 1960s. It launched the first woman, Valentina Tereshkova, the first spacewalk by Alexei Leonov, and the Salyut space stations. At its peak in 1980, the city of Leninsk had 70,000 residents enjoying amenities unavailable to most Soviet citizens. Then, in 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. Suddenly, the world's premier spaceport was located in the newly independent country of Kazakhstan. Russia needed Baikonur, Kazakhstan wanted rent. A lease was signed in 1994, giving Russia control for $115 million a year. But the decline had already begun. The city's population plummeted from 70,000 to just 39,000 today. The abandoned parts of Baikonur are surreal. Entire apartment blocks stand empty, their windows broken, gutted by scavengers. Schools with textbooks still on desks, propaganda posters fading on the walls. The most famous ruins belong to the Barren program, the Soviet space shuttle. After one flawless unmanned flight in 1988, the program was cancelled. The 2 remaining shuttles were left in a hangar. In 2002, the unmaintained roof collapsed, crushing the orbiters. Their wreckage remains there today, billions of rubles of engineering rusting under twisted metal. The environmental cost is just as stark. Decades of launching rockets with toxic propellants have poisoned the soil and groundwater for hundreds of square kilometers. Rocket stages fall back to Earth in impact zones locals call graveyards of the sky. Studies found hydrazine concentrations 40 times the acceptable limit and elevated cancer rates in nearby populations. A cleanup is practically impossible. Interviews with surviving workers reveal a strange mix of pride and bitterness. They enabled one of humanity's greatest achievements, but they did it for a state that classified their deaths and denied their illnesses. One former propellant handler, who died of liver cancer at 61, said, "We knew the fuel was dangerous, it burned your throat, but we had quotas. We didn't ask questions." Russia has extended its lease until 2050, but it's building a new spaceport on its own territory. When the lease expires, Baikonur's future is uncertain. It may become the world's largest open-air museum of the space age, while the rest slowly returns to the desert. Was it worth it? The question hangs over the rusting launch towers and empty city blocks. In exchange for reaching space for national pride and scientific knowledge, thousands suffered. An entire region was poisoned. The truth, as always, lies somewhere in the uncomfortable space between triumph and tragedy. The ruins of Baikonur tell a story not of simple victory, but of the complex, often brutal, price of progress. Thank you for watching. If you found this story compelling, please like this video and subscribe for more explorations into the hidden histories of science and technology. The operational sections are stranger still. Launchpad 1, Gagarin Start, still sends humans to space. It's a functional ruin, the infrastructure aging, the paint peeling, the concrete cracking. But the flame trenches still work. The umbilical towers still connect, and the countdown still proceeds. Modern spacecraft launched from Soviet infrastructure, maintained by underpaid technicians in a Kazakh city that's slowly emptying. This is the reality of technological legacy. It doesn't end cleanly with a final launch and a ceremonial shutdown. It decays gradually while still operating. Pieces fail one by one, maintenance budgets shrink, populations leave, until the cost of continuing exceeds the value of what continues. Sergei Korolev, the chief designer of the Soviet space program, died in 1966 during surgery at age 59. His health was broken by overwork, stress, and years spent in a Gulag labor camp. He never saw the moon landings, neither Soviet nor American. He never saw Baikonur's decline. Perhaps that's a mercy. The workers who built this cosmodrome are almost all gone now. The youngest survivors are in their 80s. When they die, so does the living memory of constructing something genuinely unprecedented, a spaceport in the middle of nowhere, built by hand, by sacrifice, and by sheer political will. Their children and grandchildren are scattered. Some stayed in Kazakhstan, but many left for Russia, Ukraine, Europe, anywhere opportunities existed. They carry the stories, but not the direct experience. And the stories simplify over time. Grandfather helped build the cosmodrome. The details fade, the brutal cold, the hunger, the constant danger, the colleagues who died. Soon there won't be anyone left who remembers when this city once called Leninsk didn't exist. When the steppe was just an empty, windswept plain. When Pad 1 was just concrete being poured by frozen men who didn't fully understand what they were building, but understood they had no choice but to build it. What remains after memory dies? Ruins, photographs, contradictory historical records, arguments about whether it was all worth it. Questions nobody can answer definitively, because the people who paid the price are dead, and the people who made the decisions left no honest accounting. Baikonur is where the Soviet Union built its future, and the future came. It just looked different than the propaganda promised. The workers got sick. The city emptied. The launch pads fell silent, one by one. But some launches still happen, some rockets still fly. The International Space Station still receives crews launched from Gagarin Start. Is this victory or defeat? Progress or waste? Triumph or tragedy? The answer changes depending on what you measure. Do you count orbits achieved or lives destroyed? Satellites deployed or workers poisoned? Scientific advancement or environmental devastation? The ruins don't answer. They just stand there, slowly collapsing, asking the same silent questions over and over. Questions whispered in the space between what was promised and what remains. If you want to see Baikonur before it fades completely, you should visit soon. Kazakhstan offers tours now. You can walk through the city, see the abandoned apartments, visit Gagarin Start. But each year there's less to see. Each winter, more roofs collapse. Each budget cycle, maintenance funding shrinks. Eventually, probably within our lifetimes, the last launch will happen. The facilities will close. The city will empty completely. Nature will begin reclaiming what was taken from it. The steppe will return to what it was before humans decided this. Patch of worthless land was the perfect place to reach for the stars. But the questions will remain. The same questions that haunt every ruin left by technological ambition. Was this necessary? Could it have been done differently? Did the achievement justify the cost? Does space exploration matter if the workers who enabled it died without recognition? Does reaching orbit excuse poisoning the groundwater for centuries? Does putting the first human in space balance against the 126 people who burned alive because of military? Marshall would delay a launch. The ruins don't answer. They are just concrete and metal returning slowly to desert. The wind doesn't care about our questions. It just blows through the broken windows of apartments where workers once lived, across the cracked launch pads where rockets once stood, and over the contaminated soil where nothing grows anymore. Baikonur is where humanity built the infrastructure to leave Earth, and that infrastructure is outlasting the civilization that built it. The launches continue, fewer each year, using equipment older than the cosmonauts who fly in it. Eventually, the launches will stop. The ruins will remain a little longer. Then those two will disappear. What we built to last forever is already fading. The sacrifices we made to reach the stars are forgotten, except in declassified documents and cancer statistics that nobody bothered to compile. What we achieved remains. There are humans in space right now, orbiting overhead, many of whom started their journey from Pad 1. So the question isn't whether we reached space, we did. The question is whether we built it right. Whether the cost was necessary or just accepted. Whether the workers deserved better or if their sacrifice was simply the price that progress demands. Baikonur won't answer. It's just ruins asking questions. The same questions every abandoned triumph asks. Was it worth it? Who paid the price? And why can't we remember their names? The desert remembers nothing. The wind erases everything. Eventually, even the ruins will go. Only the questions will remain, heavier than concrete, more durable than steel, waiting for the answers we still can't provide. Thanks for watching. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing for more journeys into the forgotten corners of history.